Now they're on. We're on. Okay. So we've been going through stories in the weekly parsha, the narratives, and exploring their deeper meaning and finding relevance. And this week we're on to a new era because we get to the third of the patriarchs, Jacob. So whilst we had all the way from creation to Adam, then Avraham, Yitzchak, and now for the next 6 portions, the whole second half of Genesis surrounds Jacob and his family, the 12 tribes, Joseph going to Egypt, until we get to the slavery and Exodus. So Yaakov, Jacob, is an amazing figure to study. We have the most information on him than all of the forefathers, 6 portions. We have a lot of stories, a lot of details, and so much about his life that we know. And of course, as Jews, we look to our forefathers, and they are the inspirations for us. It's the reason why we have their stories in the Torah. It's not a history book. This is guidelines for Judaism. These are stories and lessons which we can reflect on, and these can give us direction in our life. And I want to look at tonight one specific element of Jacob's life that I think is very fundamental to who he was, and something that can talk to us, or at least most of us, I think. So I'm going through the story we have in this portion. It starts off that Yaakov is forced to leave his hometown. He grew up in Israel. He's in Beersheba at this time. He's already an older man, in his 70s. We're coming off the cuff of the whole story where he stole the blessings from his brother Esau, and he has to run away because his brother wants to kill him. So he leaves Beersheba and he heads to Haran. Haran, he has relatives. His uncle Laban lives there, and is going to spend time with Laban, find a safe haven there. Now, put yourself in his shoes for a minute, and he's over 70 years old. Not a spring chicken. He's lived all his life in Israel, surrounded by his family. He's described in Torah as a simple, wholesome person who is studying texts and dwelling in tents, meaning he's a shepherd. He's spending his time in deep meditation and study. And now he's forced for the first time to leave all that behind, to be on the run, go to a foreign place with foreign people. His uncle Lavan was no tzaddik. He was quite a swindler. He was known to have track record. And the place he was going to was called Haran. And the sages say the reason it's called Haran, Haran comes from the word anger, Haron. It says it's a place that brought anger to God, meaning a corrupt city. And so he is now on a trajectory to leave the comforts of his tent of study, of his spiritual cocoon, and jump headfirst into the deep end of the world. That's where he's going to. And he ends up going to Lavan and staying there for 20 years. First, he meets Lavan's daughter, Rachel, and he falls in love with her, wants to marry her. And Lavan says, sure, 7 years. If you commit to me for 7 years of service, I'll give you her hand in marriage. And he commits. 7 years for the girl of my dreams. And so he commits to it. The next morning after the wedding, he realizes it wasn't Rachel, wasn't Rachel, it was Leah. Lavan had given him the wrong daughter. And we discussed this last week, that in a sense it was a bit of a subtle rebuke for him stealing the blessings from his older brother Esau. Lavan tells him, in this locale, we don't give the younger before the older. And therefore Leah had to get married first. And he's stuck. He married Leah, like it or not. So he wants to marry Rachel as well. He had promised her hand in marriage. He couldn't go back on his promise. And so Lavan says, sure, you commit another 7 years. Then you can have Rachel as well. And so, what's he going to do? He commits another 7 years. And then he stays on after that another 7 years. 21 years of living in Lavan's house. Working for Lavan. He was a shepherd, tending to his flock. And in the end, he feels it's time to leave. It's getting too much over here. I can't handle living off my uncle, his corruption. He was an idolater. He says it's time for us, tells his wives, his kids, it's time for us to set up life for ourselves. And they don't tell Lavan because he's afraid of Lavan's reaction, and he just runs away. Before he does that, though, he tells Lavan he wants to get paid for his service, and they make a whole deal. He says, Lavan, don't pay me anything. I work for you because my uncle is committed. I'll make a deal. All the spotted sheep will become mine. And a miracle happened through a certain technique he did with God, and then all the sheep that were born became spotted. And then Lavan got upset, so he changed it, all the striped sheep, and they became striped. He ended up leaving with a massive wealth. And so he came out of these 20 years when he was in the hardest possible place for a devout, faithful Jew to live. And he comes out a wealthy man, both materially and spiritually. In fact, from all of the patriarchs, he is the only one that all of his children followed his path in life. So Abraham was a very great saintly man, but he had two sons, Yitzchak and Yishmael. Yitzchak continued to spread the monotheism, the legacy of Abraham. Yishmael went in a different direction. Yitzchak had two sons, Yaakov, who continued in his footsteps, who was the forebearer of the Jewish people, and Esau, that brother, wayward brother, who went in his direction. So despite their greatness, they didn't manage to pass on the torch of their faith, of their commitment to God, to their whole entire family. There was a break in the family, a rebellion. Yaakov, who had lived in a very remote place spiritually, who lived in the house of his uncle Laban, who was serving idols, who was a thief and corrupt, and yet all of his children who grew up in that environment managed to stay on the straight and narrow, followed in his path. They became the 12 tribes. The entire Jewish nation is still, we count ourselves back to the 12 tribes, right? I'm from this tribe, I'm a Kohen. We don't know which tribe we're from today, but the Jewish people for all of history were grouped by these 12. So they all were great people. So that's the stories we read of in this week's portion. And what I want to discuss and look at is how Yaakov was able to do this. How was he able to go through the most challenging experiences, both materially and personally, also spiritually, and yet he managed to get through unscathed, and even more that he prospered. He became even more successful than his father and grandfather. What gave him that strength? And I think this is very relevant for us because we also have our challenges. We have our difficult moments. We have things that don't go well for us in different areas of life. Everyone has their own things. I'm sure we can all pinpoint very specific challenges and areas in our life that are these charans, these dark places. Whether it's moments, whether it's areas of life, whether it's relationships, whether it's personal losses, something which we experience, or things that we experience, that bog us down. They get the better of us. They drag us down into the pit. And we can sometimes manage to overcome them or get by, and sometimes we don't. They really get to us. And at least in that moment, maybe even they scar us for life. And if we can look to Jacob, look to Yaakov and say, he managed to do it. He got out of there okay. If we know how he did that, we can say, well, I can get the strength in there as well to do that in my life too. So before we go to the story of Jacob, we're all here, and everyone in our own life has been through things and has developed, I'm sure, tools for resistance, right? Ways that we get by difficult things. I don't want to volunteer. Doesn't need to be specifics of the instance, of the situation. But a time where you went through something very challenging and something pulled you through it. what was that? Don't get into specifics of what it was, but what helped you through it? What helped you go through that difficulty and come out on the other side, either unscathed or a better person?
The invisible hand, Hashem, for sure. Off the bat. Hand came out of nowhere. And following that, people who were just popped up in my life out of nowhere. People who just popped up and gave everything they could, clothing, emotionally, food, and I never forgot. But it started out with Hashem clearly pulling me out.
So something outside of yourself, meaning, tell me if I'm wrong.
It's not outside, but like Hashem is not outside, and there's no other way. Just, I don't know how else to explain it, but that would be it. The thing that kicked it off. And then people, just emissaries, who really provided the basic essentials, and then support in Snake Pit's experience that they had gone through, and all of a sudden it was a miracle. I was whole, whole again.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Any other volunteers?
During my hardest times, what I would always do, I would sink into the various hobbies that I had. So one of which was, I build and repair DOS computers, which is something very nerdy and very niche. But I would come home, and my mother would always know, and does always know, when there's something bugging me, because I will come home and I'll just work on them forever. And I'll try to tweak every little thing, and I make everything perfect. And I have another hobby of mine is lock sport. It's actually it's picking locks. Interesting hobby, I guess. But so I would just sit at the table, the dining room table, and I'd pick it, and then I would take it apart and I would repen it to make it behave differently, and then I'd pick it, and then I would repen it again and again. And so when my mother would see this, she'd always say something like, "What's bothering you?" I would notice it myself. It's very funny because even like if I don't know something's really bothering me, I'll just gravitate towards that. So it'll be the way that I'll know that something is bothering me, even when I don't consciously know. Like if I'm just having a rough time at something, if I'm anxious or whatever, like I'll just catch myself just staying up well into the night on my hobbies, and I'll know, it'll click in my mind that I'm stressed or that something is bothering me.
Thank you for sharing. Distraction. Distracting yourself from the pain is a mechanism to get through it. Nice. So everyone has their own techniques, right? Their own ways. Jacob had something very unique. And there's two points I want to make. Number one, which is a very important thing to realize, is they didn't only get through the challenge, he grew from it. And that's an incredible thing. Because let's say you use distraction, which is a perfectly normal tool to get through a challenge, and you will write it out or you'll just ignore it until it goes away. So you managed to get by the challenge, but you're the same person you were before and afterwards. It didn't help you in life. It didn't distract you, or maybe it did because you have to then go through those distractions. But it didn't help you grow. Yaakov managed to take this challenge and actually build character from it. Actually become a more developed person, more progress further in his spiritual and material life, and came out on the other end of this challenge a better person, a more wholesome person. So number one is we're looking for something that won't just help us manage through pain, manage through difficulty and challenge, but somehow something that we can capitalize on the challenge and use it for opportunity, for growth. That's what Yaakov did. And that's something which we all have the potential to do as well. The forefathers, there were 3 of them. And it's not by chance we also pray 3 times a day. The Talmud says, that's one opinion of the Talmud at least, that the reason we pray 3 times is one of the prayers, each one was instituted by one of the forefathers. And we find, in fact, reference to each one of them praying. Abraham, we have a reference for him praying in the morning. Yitzchak, we have a reference praying in the afternoon. And Yaakov, there's a reference for him praying in the evening. And so the sages say, we find these 3 prayers. So we, the Jewish people, emulate our forefathers. We pray in the morning, because Abraham prayed in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. And this is one of the reasons why they developed to be 3 prayers a day in Judaism. The commentaries explain that it's not by chance that each of these forefathers developed one of those prayers. So it's not like, well, Abraham happened to pray in the morning, and Isaac was the next in line, he prayed the second prayer. Each prayer has a different character. The time of day that you pray has an impact and influence over what your prayer looks like. And the fact that Abraham instituted specifically the morning prayer was a result of who he was, his character, his life story. That Isaac instituted the afternoon prayer, Mincha, was a reflection of who he was. And a Yaakov instituted Arvis, prayer in the evening at nighttime, was a reflection of what he stood for. So Abraham was this trailblazer, right? He was the innovator. He discovered monotheism. He developed a relationship with God, and he began spreading this to the world. So what time of day reflects his character? The morning. A new day is breaking. The sun rises. It's inspirational. You're filled with hope. There's a new day on the horizon. There's big things happening. That was Abraham. He was a sunrise, right? He was this revolutionary person who just came on the scene, on the world scene, with this novel idea. Belief in one God who transcends the world and who interacts with the world. The idea that we have a moral code because of the way God wrote it into the world. He started a revolution that till today is having an impact, right? 1/3 of the world or more traces their faith back to Avraham. So the morning prayer, Shacharis, where we're starting a new day full of hope, full of new life, that's Avraham. That's where he encountered God, in the sunrise in the morning. Yitzchak, his role was to solidify Avraham's vision. He wasn't an innovator. We don't know much about his life. Very little in Torah said about him, one portion. And even then, a lot of it has to do with his kids, how they get the blessings from him, and how his father is sacrificing him. So very little is known about Yitzchak, but his role wasn't to create something new. He was the stability, the anchor that allowed Avraham's revolution to take real seed, to really plant itself as being something sustainable. Like you have a company, a startup. You have the creator, the innovator, and usually they're very disorganized, and they're all over the place, and they can't think things through properly, but they have these amazing ideas, and they see a vision of how things should be. But a successful startup needs the second in command who's able to be business savvy, organize, get a team together, really make the product sustainable, whatever it's going to be. So Yitzchak, that was his role. His role was to take Avraham, we discussed it a few weeks ago, Avraham was chesed, kindness, just giving. Yitzchak was the idea of discipline, gevura, which is, organize things. And then you need to hold back and see where things belong and give space for growth. And so his role was sustaining the vision of Avraham. That's like the middle of the day. The sun is already risen, just keeping the light, keeping the day going. And so Yitzchak, where did he encounter God? At midday. That's when he prayed. Mincha, in the middle of the day, that's where he had to, that's where he prayed. Yaakov, he, during his lifetime, faced challenge. And at the end of his lifetime, he went down to Egypt with his children, which was the beginning of the exile in Egypt, the darkest time for the Jewish people. And so his role was to encounter God, was to find light in the dark moments. His role was specifically to go through challenges. God ordained that he should have to run away from home and go to Haran, spend time with Lavan, live in this darkness of night, and be able to find light in the darkness. And so when did he pray to God? When did he encounter God? At Ma'ariv, during the evening service. At nighttime, where figuratively his life was at nighttime, he prayed, he found light. And we pray all 3 prayers a day. We should be praying. That's in Jewish tradition. Which means we all have the capacity to follow the footsteps of Abraham and have this creative spirit, have this enthusiasm in our service to God. We're told that in the service to God, every day should be like a new. We're saying the Shema, like as if we heard it today. That should be our enthusiasm with God. We have the role of Yitzchak, consistency in our goodness, consistency in our behavior. The idea that we're not just live inspired, day in, day out, do the right things. And we all also have the capacity to live like a Yaakov, to be able to find light in the darkness. We pray every evening. When it's getting dark outside, the sun is falling, darkness takes over the world, we pray. We invest and inject light into that darkness. When did Yaakov invent the evening service? At what stage in his life do we find him praying at nighttime? Right when he's leaving his hometown, Beersheba, on the way to Haran. That's when we find him praying at nighttime. And I want to read the verse in this episode. I skipped over this episode, and it's going to be telling to us this whole episode of how he managed to get through the years in Haran and grow from them. So he leaves his hometown, and on the way, we're told, "Vayifka b'makom." He bumps into a place, chanced upon a place, and he goes to sleep there because the sun has fallen. He took some stones as a pillow. All the details are significant, and we'll explain in a minute. And he goes to sleep and has a dream. I have a dream. Yaakov has a dream of a ladder that is grounded on earth, and the top of the ladder reaches the heavens. And there are angels of God which are going up the ladder and down the ladder. On top of the ladder is God. And God tells him, "I am God, the God of your father Yitzchak, your grandfather Abraham, and the land which you are lying upon, Israel, I am going to give to you and your descendants. And there will be many like the dust of the earth, spread out east, west, north, and south. And God says, I'm going to protect you and be with you wherever you go. I will not leave you until I have fulfilled my promise to you." With that, Yaakov wakes up. And he says, this must be a holy place. This must be the house of God. And he builds an altar from the stones that he took as a pillow. offers a sacrifice to God. Tradition has it that place was actually Temple Mount. It was the home of God. It was to become the place of the Beis HaMikdash. It was the same place where his father, Isaac, was almost killed in the binding of Isaac on that same mountain. And so there was historical significance, and there was to be significance as a holy place. After that dream, he continues going and goes to Haran. So the sages say, what does it mean he encountered that place? The term Vayifka, he encountered, also means prayer. And so when he went there, he prayed. So he stopped at nighttime to go to sleep, which means he prayed at nighttime. So we learn from there the idea of Arvis, the idea of praying Ma'ariv at nighttime. This encounter set him up for success in what was to come. So it was a little sort of incubator for Yaakov's growth that allowed him to grow through his experiences in Lavan's home in Haran over the next 20 years. So what happened there? What happened on that mountain? What was his dream all about? So I'm going to crowdsource there. What do you think? He saw a vision of a ladder, angels going up and down the ladder. What can that mean?
Oh, that's connection to God, and it's here. It's from the highest rung to the lowest rung, for the smallest piece of dust to the most angelic sight you could fathom in your mind, what you could see and touch, tangible, and then the spiritual part. It's all connected.
From the earthly to the spiritual.
From the highest rung, and so it's
okay.
It's right here. And also that he woke up when God says, I'll be with you until you fulfill or carry out your, I forget the exact words, but I'll be with you till you carry out that.
Until my promises to you have been fulfilled.
Right. So it's like a ladder of connection. It's always there, and he's no longer in slumber. Because most of us are in slumber. I mean, I could be, on a daily basis, get caught up, habits, always flipping on this once in a while. But we have an opportunity to wake up.
Okay, saying he's waking up was more than just waking up from sleep. It was symbolic of being awake, being, woke. He was aware of something deeper. Okay?
Is that like a metaphor of the light into darkness? Sort of waking up from sleep is like bringing light into darkness in some way.
Okay? So it's interesting, the Midrash says that for 14 years prior, we're missing in the timeline of Yaakov's life a bunch of years. So the Midrash says for 14 years before this episode, when he ran away from home from his brother, he went to study for 14 years in the Academy of Shem, who was one of the grandson of Noah, still alive, and he was this great mystical sage. And Yaakov spent 14 years studying. And the Midrash says, for those 14 years, he didn't sleep. For the next 20 years, because of his commitment to working in the sheep of Lavan, he didn't sleep. He never lay down to go to sleep. And it says, when the verse references he went to sleep there, it was the only time in that 34-year period that he slept. So that obviously has deeper meaning, more than just, not catching any shut-eye. And that could be what you're saying, Ken, that there's a notion of sleeping and waking up from sleep that carried him through, perhaps. You also want to...
Well, there's also, a frequently heard saying that pain is the cornerstone of growth. Growing pains. You can't grow unless you're in pain in some way. And I think being awake for 34 years would be painful.
Well, that's really the question. How do you turn pain into growth? Meaning, growth has to come through pain. Essentially, it's true. If life is easy for you, you don't challenge yourself. You don't discover yourself. You're not forced to use more of your potential, and you don't grow. But the question really is, how do you convert pain into growth? What do you have to capitalize on that pain to use it for growth?
Faith.
Faith? Explain.
For me, it's like I have to believe that there's something outside of myself that's going to fill me up in some way.
Okay.
You know, that life is more than just what exists in my head and myself.
So that's a powerful idea, and so there's a few ideas the commentaries take from this episode, and I want to discuss a few of them because I think they all have their place. Well, I'll start off from what you said of faith, and I think that's an important thing. When you go through a tough time, someone, let's say, loses their job, or has a loss in their family, or whatever it's going to be, from the small to the big. In that moment, you're enveloped in that pain, in that challenge. It takes over your whole thinking, your whole life. And subconsciously, you sort of think it's going to be there forever, right? You, in the moment, it's there forever. I mean, this is everything in my life. This is my whole world. And that's why it gets to you. Because you can't even think outside of that. And what ends up happening is that you get dragged down with whatever it is. It just eats you up alive. If you would know with certainty, I don't know if we can, but if you would know with certainty that it's going to pass, right? If you know that in a year's time you are going to be well past that, you're going to have a new job, you're going to be in a happier place, whatever it's going to be, you know that it's going to end. Then you're facing that challenge right on the moment. You have a very different perspective. It's like, okay, this is terrible. But it doesn't eat you up, doesn't take you over, because you know that it's not it. You know that it's a year, it's a week, maybe even 10 years, but then I know this is not my entirety of my life. I have confidence that it's going to end, and I'm going to get past it. So that knowledge or faith lends perspective even to the right now. That I know that in the future things will be better. Right now, I'm able to look differently at the pain. Not only manage with pain, but then I can even use it as growth. Because if it doesn't take over me, I can have control over it. If I allow the pain, the challenge to control me, I get knocked down. As soon as I stop it controlling me, I'm able to control it. So, for example, if someone loses a job, right, and we shouldn't know of it, or if someone is having some sort of dispute with a family member, right, and it's really taking over their life. If you know that in a year's time you will make up, or in a year's time you'll have a new job that is great, you don't have to worry so much now about the actual problem. Instead, you can think, well, what can I get from this problem? Right? I lost my job. Maybe it's going to take time off to travel. Or maybe I can look at why this job failed and why it wasn't for me, and where I can work on myself to become better at those areas I failed, or find different places I should invest my energies, and so actually become a better person. As soon as I'm not knocked down by that challenge, I can analyze the challenge and then grow from it. So having faith that it's going to end, knowing that it's not the be-all and end-all of existence, is the first step in being able to use a challenge for growth. Stage 2 of that faith, not only do I believe that it's going to end, I believe that right now it happened for a reason. So if you have faith in a God, faith in a creator that is in some level engaged and involved with the world, and everything that happens is part of some plan, part of maybe a reason that no human being can ever fathom, but there's something organized, designed to this world. So now, that gives even deeper perspective. If I'm going through this because I'm meant to get something from this. Because on the other end, something else is in store for me. There's a plan. And as soon as I am able to recognize the plan here, my whole thinking shifts. It's like, imagine yourself suddenly realizing that you're an actor, and this is part of the script. And although maybe you fall down, that's part of the script. You're following the script. The fall wasn't a mistake, wasn't an accident. It's actually part of the way you're supposed to act in that scene. Right? So the same thing is, life is part of my way of achieving my life's mission. Part of my destiny is to go through this. So that shifts your whole thinking. Okay, this happened to me. I don't want to say big deal. It is a big deal, whatever it is. But, okay, it's supposed to be there. What can I learn from it? How can I grow? So the shift in your thinking is going one step further. Not only I know it's going to end, but I know it's supposed to be here now. So Yaakov is told both those things in his dream, right? God tells him that first of all, you have promises. The land of Israel will be yours. Your descendants will be numerous. They'll spread out, successful. So he knows whatever he's going to face is only temporary. He knows has God's promise of success. And God tells him, I'm going to be with you until you've reached that. What does God being with him mean? Of course, God's everywhere. It means every step of the way is meant to be there. I'm with you. This is part of the plan. This is part of my plan for the world, that you go through these things. So those are the first two sort of steps of realizing how to. They're sort of the mindsets, the background picture that allow you to confront the challenges, confront the pain that you may face in life. It has this vision of a ladder. The ladder is rooted on the earth and goes to the heavens. So yes, the ladder speaks of his relationship with God, that God is with him, that there's a direct line of communication. He can go up, climb up, and God can, so to speak, climb down. The angels going up, the angels going down. There's a real, in the here and now, in my life, God is here. There's something more to it, though. There's this dichotomy in the world between the material and the spiritual, right? Between the earth and the heavens. And the material world is the world of challenge, of pain. At the end of the day, there's going to be difficulties and pain we face as human beings. The spiritual world is a world of truth, where everything, is seen from its proper perspective. There's no pain, no challenge, it's all good. And what this letter symbolizes is that there's a way to connect those two. There's supposed to be a fusion between heaven and earth. Judaism doesn't believe in throwing away the material and just climbing up this ladder to the heavens. We don't believe in shunning the world and life as we know it as human beings. We have to embrace it. So, just like spiritually we went to embrace the material world and develop spiritually in the material world, the same thing is true with the package that comes with it. The pain that comes with the material life. That also can be imbued with spiritual bliss, with understanding and proper, what's what I'm looking for? Mindfulness or proper perspective. That within the material, within Haran, Yaakov was about to go into the earth of the earth, the most earthy place that existed, morally corrupt Haran. And God was telling him, that is, to a certain sense, that is no further from God than the most spiritual place. God's everywhere. From every experience you can encounter God. The ladder was rooted in the earth. That very same ladder that was perched up in heaven. And that's the significance why this dream happened on Temple Mount. because the Beis HaMikdash epitomized this idea. It was a place where heaven and earth kissed. It was a place where there were open miracles, where God's presence was manifest. It was a place where earth and heaven collided. And so in that moment, in that place, Yaakov was able to experience that. Was able to have a real recognition, a vision of that ladder. He felt it. He felt that wherever you go, no matter how low it's going to be, low spiritually, low personally, no matter how low and dark of a place it is, God's ladder reaches there. Even there, you can encounter God. There's a way to deal with that. You can relate to God. You can find spiritual experiences everywhere. You don't have to go meditate on a mountaintop to find God. In saying hello to the person on the street, that's a way to encounter God. As long as you are mindful of there's two human beings there, my soul, your soul, we're reflecting something much greater than ourselves, and that encounter can be a spiritual experience. And so, even in the challenging moments, the challenge itself, we recognize that itself, that challenge, has sparks of God in it. There's something holy, special, unique about it. Now, it's very hard in the moment. But the knowledge of it, knowing that no matter what happens to me in life, there's something deep there. It's from God. The ladder of God reaches there. That enables you to have the proper approach. Not to react to the pain, to the challenge, but to be able to take it in and dig deep in yourself, dig deep in the situation to find good, to find God. There's also practical, not only in this knowledge, but practical things that Yaakov did. Before he went to sleep, he put stones around his head. Now, if you look carefully at the text, it seems to be a pillow, but it says he put the stones around his head. And the commentaries say he was actually protecting himself from wild animals. So, putting the stones there creates a barrier, no, animal's going to come, just chance upon him. And there's a beautiful explanation of this, a homiletic explanation from the Rebbe, where he says, Yaakov knew he's going to Haran. He's going to a place of darkness. And it's great to have all the faith in the world, promises from God, to have all the proper meditations and the proper, you the right frame of mind, everything is good. At the end of the day, when you encounter that pain, that challenge, it's going to hit you like a pile of bricks. They say a story of a rabbi who was big businessman as well. And one day he was giving a class and news came out that all his ships at sea, there had been a big storm, all his merchandise, he invested everything in it, was lost. Ships had all sunk. And they wanted to break the news to him, his students, in a way that he wouldn't get too upset. So one of the students went to him and says, Rabbi, remember you taught us that passage in Talmud that said you have to thank God for the bad things the same way you thank God for the good things. He says, sure. The student asked, how's it possible? How's it possible? Rabbi said, because everything's from God. And even if we seem as a challenge to us, we have to appreciate it from God and thank God the same way something good happens. And the student says, yeah, but really, Rabbi, is it really possible for a human being to celebrate such disaster the same way we celebrate good? And the Rabbi started explaining deeper and deeper psychological insights, spiritual insights, kept going and going. And the student says, Rabbi, I want to let you know that your ship sunk at sea. He fainted. Even after all the explanations, all said and done, when push comes to shove and you hit it hits you.
Shock.
The shock, right? So, the Rebbe says Yaakov's going to Haran. He put those stones around his head. It was a symbolic move to protect his most important faculty, his mind, from the external forces. Wild animals there, but the external pressures and forces he's going to face in Haran. Which means he had to be preemptive when going into the situation. Not to allow himself to be distracted. Not to allow himself to be influenced from Lavan. So when he went into it, when he went into this encounter, when he went into Lavan's home for 20 years, before he went in there, he put up protective measures that I'm not going to be influenced by Lavan. I'm not going to allow this darkness to pervade my own thinking. Now, the stones were the physical way he kept the animals out. What exactly he did to keep out the forces from entering his mind? Figurative stones. The Midrash says he sang psalms all day long. Keeping reminding himself of who I am and what I believe in. So that's another thing that we can learn from. In the here and now, we're all in a good place. We're sitting at a class, we're enjoying ourselves. We may have, in the back of our mind challenges, but in the place we're in right now, we're good. Right now, we have to build those fences to protect ourselves. So with the attitude that we know that everything's from God, we know that everything's planned, and we have that, ladder, we recognize that wherever I go, God is with me, and I can encounter God in any situation. But we have to prepare ahead. There has to be something that's anchoring us into our deepest beliefs. That no matter where we find ourselves, we're not going to stray from that. Something anchoring us into our inner happiness. That no matter what challenge comes, I'm going to remember who I really am as a happy person and not allow it to get into my thinking. Because once it eats its way in, it becomes the way you think. It's so hard to get out of it. The Talmud says that a prisoner can't release himself, right? If you're imprisoned in a cell, someone has to open the cell for you. When you're in the rut, but it becomes the way you think, you are the problem. And therefore you can't free yourself from it. So you have to create barriers, or in a positive sense, create things as part of your routine that always remind you of the good, of who you really are. And these are really important. What I, spiritually, but I think this is also practically, if the idea of we're sitting here at class, Torah study. If someone has a commitment, I'm going to study 5 minutes a day. Or pray 5 minutes a day. I was speaking to someone this week who recently started putting on tefillin every day and praying for 5 minutes in the morning. He told me originally it was a really big commitment, finding the time and the discipline, but it's changed his whole day. So there's 5 minutes, he's having troubles at work, he's going through hard times in different areas. He says, the 5 minutes of clarity I have in the morning, of starting my day off with this, I set myself up, so I come to work in a good mood, even though I'm having these issues with my boss, I'm having issues with this. I approach everything differently. So I've put those stones around me, I've come in situation with certain protective measures. I know who I am, I know where I want to go, I have direction, and I put barriers that I shouldn't get influenced by other things. And so we have to set up some things in our life, whether it's daily routines, weekly routines, something that's going to give us the constant anchor, constant lifeline. No matter where we're going to go, it's going to protect us not to be bogged down by something in the first place. And so for everyone, it could be something different, something positive. But if you can find something positive to add, if it's daily, it's even better because there's a constant reminder. All it means is 5 minutes a day or 3 minutes a day. If it's 3 minutes a day of prayer, Yaakov prayed Mariv. That was what set him up. Night fell, he connected with God. That's put in right perspective. Be a few minutes of study. It can be with something else. It can be, having a routine to help someone out, to volunteer somewhere. That's going to remind me that I'm worth something. It reminds me that no matter what I feel about myself in the moment, I have impact in the world. I am changing people's lives. I am worth something. I'm a force of good in the world because I have that weekly routine to volunteer somewhere. So then no matter what challenges come my way and whatever they try to, the challenges sort of attempt to convince me in my mind, I know that I'm not that because I have this thing on my schedule that reminds me that I'm doing something good. It reminds me that I'm connected to something greater than that. So these are all tools that Yaakov Avinu had. He's able to go to Lavan's house and be successful financially, be successful with his family, and be successful spiritually. And so we shouldn't face those challenges. Hopefully we won't have to go to any Haran, we won't have to live through any darkness. But if we take and incorporate some of what Yaakov had, the evening service, to be able to find within darkness and recognize that God is there as well, and be able to set ourselves up to realize that the challenges are short term, and to set in motion beforehand protective measures that are going to be constant anchor with our inner goodness, inner happiness, then we too will able to not only face the challenges that come our way, not only get through the dark moments, the struggles we have, but we'll be able to utilize them to become better people, to grow, and to experience the best teacher. And only those that have really faced challenge can really experience themselves and experience life. And we should be able to find the silver lining, be able to really use each challenge as an opportunity to become better people, to grow, and to make the world around us a better place. And so that's the lesson we have from Yaakov. Anyone want to add something?
The ladder. I was just using a ladder the other day. But, a ladder is not just a meeting place, like the next floor up and down here, but it's also to ascend. It's like a road to say, go up. It's not just on a ladder. It's not, you don't just meet here or there. You could reach some high heights. I've been on some 40-foot ladders, very high. You go up a few stories. So for me, the significance, like with the ladder, is ascend, go. And some of the tools that have come my way, dveikus, and to really desire it, and kavanah, to desire it like you'll die, right? And very intense, but that came after a lot of experiences of being pulverized, by life. A lot of experiences, but then from that, it just elicited more of a desire. Not a mountaintop, not in this world, but to ascend right from here, go up the ladder. It's real, but there's a way to come back. Hillel said, I think the Alter Rebbe said, hasten and return, for your purpose is to make this a dwelling place for Hashem. But do it.
Go up and come down.
Do it, or like the Rebbe said, do something. I think he said it in the 80s or whatever. He said, do something difficult, do something novel. Don't just bring your light to the midday. The light's bright then. Go out in the night. Like you were saying, like Yaakov. Dig your wells, the water, And so I try to keep that in mind. So with the prayer and meditation, kavanah, and like you said, to fill in, like incorporate everything, speech, body, put everything into it. Let the kids see it. Everybody, throw yourself into it.
I'll finish off with one, in the ladder. One beautiful idea. It's not so much important, in Judaism especially, where in the ladder you are, but which direction you're going. I'll tell you why. The ladder between here and heaven, how long is that ladder? Infinite. Right? Between the material and the spiritual, us and God, there's an infinite ladder. On an infinite ladder, can you be any closer to the end? No. Right? So, where you are on the ladder is irrelevant. Who's higher on the ladder? Depends which direction you're going. So you can be all the way up. But if you're going down, the person over here is going up, they're higher. Because they're moving in the direction closer to God. And so Judaism is the same way. Everyone's in different paths, in different rungs in the ladder. Everyone came from different places, whatever it's going to be. But it's not about where you are on the ladder that makes you a good Jew. No, it's not about how much of the quote-unquote clothing you wear and whatever it is. That's irrelevant. It's not which rung you're on, it's which direction you're going. a good Jew, if that term's appropriate even, is someone who's moving in the right direction, not someone who's high up on this ladder. Growing. As long as you're growing in the right direction, your aim is to get closer to God. You're becoming higher on this ladder. That is the definition of a good Jew. That's someone who's high on the ladder. It's not about your position, it's about direction. That's another thing to learn from this ladder.
Okay.
Thank you all.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.